When people first start studying graphic design, they're always shown the paintings at Lascaux as the first example of communication. But it's also the first example of animation. In fact, you see that the animals themselves are leaping or running. In fact, you could imagine that there'd be a fire that'd be making them kind of change and animate. We're also introduced to animation when we're babies. Instead of our parents putting up a painting on the wall and asking us to engage with that, they put a mobile that moves in front of us. It blows in the wind, and then we also play with it, which means that we engage with it. And this brings us to squirrel theory. Squirrel theory is my little simple theory that no matter what's going on in this big, beautiful forest, as soon as there's a little tiny squirrel that comes out, we're going to pay attention to that squirrel and notice it running across the forest. And it doesn't have to be in your face. So graphic designers talk about things with principles of design, and one of those is contrast. You can see the first box is not that interesting, but you add a contrast between the two designs, and it's more interesting. But you add a punch of color, and then you also make it more dynamic by putting it in the corner, and it's much more interesting. So contrast is something that engages us in design. You're probably looking at the white bird right now, right? But if we change your focus over to the other bird, then we're changing how you see that design. So this is what I call the gestalt of design. It's no longer just the sum of the parts is equal to more. But if a bicycle is not a bicycle until you actually put it together and it actually functions. And once it starts to animate, then it can do the things that it's meant to, including tricks. So to study animation, we have to study the great designers as well. Saul Bass is one of my favorites. He was an iconic graphic designer who did logos that everybody knows, but he also started motion graphics in films. So for The Man with the Golden Arm, he showed us that with some simple animations, you could engage the viewer in that animation and focus their attention right in the middle to where the text was, and even transition to a new object using just simple paper cutouts. So this idea of transitions is important to animation. We can do these transitions with as simple as a fade, or we can take one object and make it into a different object, or we can change it in color and shape. Then if we add motion to it, you might not even notice when it changes to a new object. And we can do these transitions across the entire environment as well. Now, transitions can be more complicated. They can be this plane, and this plane happens to be up in the sky where the clouds are, and from clouds we get drops of rain, and the rain drops to the ground, and from there grows a tree, and because the tree grows, it then grows money, and that's how we all get rich, right? So Saul Bass also understood the power of story in animation. In It's a Mad, Mad World, he uses a white globe to connect all the different parts of the animation. In fact, it's almost like we're following the bouncing ball throughout the entire animation. And this is a technique that is well known. In fact, it's known by those who do sleight of hand technique. They know what the story is going to be about their animation. They know what they're trying to get you to look at, and when they're trying to get you to look at something, to keep your attention engaged and also make sure you get the right story they want you to get. The problem is, this is our world, right? Instead, we have a world where we want to be in control, and it's complicated. We have all these different devices we want to use. We all have all these different apps that we use. We have all different needs that we want to achieve. And so we have to look at animation for having a purpose. So that purpose might be different. It might be something as simple as engaging us in a few different slides. Or it might be as complicated as showing us the process of purchasing something with a credit card and showing whether or not we've completed that purchase. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. It can also be a squirrel, as I might call it, could be as simple as a menu item. How many of us have played with a menu item a couple times just because it was kind of cool? Or something in an app where you did it a couple times over, and you're like, oh, that was kind of neat, right? It can be a small little element that focuses our attention and makes it more engaging. Now, we can also do animation across an entire website. This is an example of what's called parallax scrolling, where the entire website moves up and down as you scroll through the page, which makes it more engaging, and it makes us look at design in a different way. So here's the problem. We as graphic designers have to look at the world as something that's animated. And we have to look at ways to include a dynamic side of design to the things that we create, because it's what people are looking for. It's what people want. And of course, it makes it more interesting. So hopefully we can make even the humble user guide more interesting through animation. We might actually make somebody read it, but I think that's probably stretching a little bit too far. And this is what I think we need to know squirrels for. So it's going to be hard at first, of course. There's lots of software out there to help you. And at first you might fail. But if you keep on working at including animation in your designs, you might find at some point that you're able to succeed and create a more engaging experience. And so this is why I'm talking about squirrels, because there are those big elements and those little elements that make us focus in something in design and help us engage in that as users. Thanks.